All right, our first panel today is a panel that's going to be talking about federal policy. What really drives federal policy? What does it look like when we have the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed, and also the package of tax incentives that are still hanging in the balance? So joining me for this discussion is Warner Baxter. He's executive chairman of Ameren, based out of St. Louis, Missouri. He's also about to be in about 16 hours our next chairman of EEI. And then as Michael said, we have Jigar Shah here. He's the director of the Loan Programs Office at the Department of Energy, and he used to be with Generate Capital. He's had a lot of experience when we talk about decarbonization of economies. And then, of course, Rich Powell. Rich Powell is the CEO of ClearPath and ClearPath Action. I can't think of anyone better to have here today because he really is the voice and the reliable voice, I say, for policymakers to go to him to talk about what innovation is possible. So, gentlemen, join me.
Go ahead, I'll sit down here. More room down here, right?
All right, we're going to jump right into this. As I said, we don't have much time. I don't know if this panel can talk as fast as Dr. Weber did, but let's check it out. I started talking and mentioned the infrastructure law in the opening. And Jigar, I wanted to throw the first question to you because when you think about IIJA, I think about the carbon-free technologies that really got a jump start from the law as far as funding is concerned. How are you viewing that from the Loan Program Office yourself, and how do you kind of view that suite of technologies and what your role is there?
Yeah, it's an interesting place that we're at, right? Because the last analog in people's minds of this kind of money going to DOE is the ERA stimulus bill. And that bill was really designed for stimulus. This bill is not designed for stimulus, as we've been reminded many times. And so this bill is designed to actually make things happen and to achieve liftoff in sectors that have not yet achieved it. And I think the level of coordination required to achieve that liftoff is not something that any of the parties around the table are comfortable with, right? So when you think about the hydrogen hubs, like the oil and gas sector don't actually know how to tell us what they need. And then the natural gas utilities should be a central part of the conversation, but they're, trying to feel their way around the hydrogen space. And then you've got all the growth companies, of course, right, that are venture capital backed, and they've got a point of view. And so when you think about how we should spend the $8 billion there for the hydrogen hub, or how we should spend the $1.5 billion, or the DAC hubs, or whatever it is, the level of coordination required there is very high, and LPO has been doing a lot of that already through our commercial debt. So we've just sort of been thrust into the middle of helping to steer these conversations. But I think that for many people who are used to ERA stimulus, they're like, well, so are you going to get the money out of the December? Probably not. Like, we still have to get the information in to figure out how the money can be best used to catalyze this level of liftoff. And so I think there's some uneasiness around how the process works because not everyone's on the same page there. So we're working through that.
Well, I want to ask you, I want to follow up with that in a few minutes because I want you to tell us about the green hydrogen project out of Utah that you funded, I believe it was last week. So I want to talk about that in just a minute. Rich, is there something in IIJA that you think about that is a sort of a game changer with regards to a technology or something that was funded there? To me, I think about our partnership with ClearPath, EEI's partnership on carbon-free technologies, and the fact that we did that so early, we were able to really inform the infrastructure law, not only on the Hill, but all the way to its inception as a law. So tell us a little bit about your leadership there. Tell me what one of the technologies in there that really excites you.
Well, thanks so much, Brian. Thanks to EEI for having this really important discussion. I'll try to cover a lot of ground, but it's a little hard after Mike Weber, who's talking to myself. So we'll try to get a lot in. I think that the carbon-free technology initiative that EEI convened amongst a lot of different analysts in sort of the innovation space laid out a really powerful roadmap in this space for demonstrating a whole suite of advanced clean energy technologies. And the infrastructure bill checked a lot of the boxes that we had put together in the carbon-free technology initiative, which is a really powerful bill. I think the single most important piece of the bill is the suite of cost shares for major demonstrations of, call it the last 50% or last 20% technologies. So these are the dollars for advanced nuclear technologies and demonstrations of carbon capture on both coal and gas, and the huge injection for clean hydrogen hubs. The large-scale demonstrations of long-duration storage technologies, not just more lithium, right, but very long-duration stuff that can take us weeks or maybe even months or seasons, and even for geothermal demonstrations. So I realize you asked me for one technology, I need 5, but I think it's very important for everyone in the room to understand, if you don't already, that there is a very large pool of non-dilutive federal grant capital out there. I'm not a finance guy, Jigar is. My understanding is that the cost of capital is going up. So free capital looks even better than it used to look relative to the cost of capital today. There's a lot of free capital out there, and if you're not yet looking at potentially demonstrating those classes of technologies via the notices of intent that really have started to roll out across a number of these, I'd say it's a really important place for your planning to start looking.
Yeah, 62 billion.
Yeah, Mr. Incoming Chair, I will say that Warner was really central when it was about organizing our industry to pass that law. So Warner has been our infrastructure point amongst the industry, and we're awfully proud of the law itself, but we're also proud of the $54 billion that our industry directly has available to it. So I want you to give me some idea, Warner, what in there really excites you more? We have everything from grid mod to resilience to broadband to electric transportation. What is it that you think of as Ameren is looking for with regards to the outcome of the law?
Well, Brian, number one, I think you gave a great list there to begin with. I think we do. Both Jigar and Rich said. I think first, we have to understand just how important this piece of legislation is. It's a once-in-a-generation type of thing. And as Brian and I and many others were on the Hill talking about it, said, now is the time we need to be leaning in a real big way across the board on these clean energy technologies, because we know it takes time. And as Rich, as you were saying, whether it's the last 20% or 50%, it's going to take an incredible effort. And so we at Ameren, at the end of the day, we, like many of our colleagues, can get to about 85% to net zero. It's that last 15% that's really going to be tough. And so the fact that we have opportunities out there for things like, whether it's advanced nuclear, whether it's carbon capture, whether it's hydrogen, right? These are really important for the clean energy technology. So we're looking at all of these. And at the same time, we're also looking at the energy resilience piece of this legislation. So we all think it's just about the clean energy technologies. But the reliability and resilience pieces are very important. And there are things in there for transmission, for cybersecurity. That's all part about resilience as well. And so what we've done, where you can't boil the ocean, what we have decided to do at Ameren is making sure that we look at our strategy that we have, which is focused on our customers, building benefits for our customers, both in reliability and resiliency of the grid, as well as clean energy transition, and how we can accelerate it in a cost-effective way. As you rightfully pointed out, this is cost of capital. I can do that math, right? I'm a former CFO. When I can get this money from the government, that makes a big deal. It's a cost share. Yet at the same time, what we also have learned is that this can't be done just with Ameren within our 4 walls. And so what's really, I think the underappreciated piece of this legislation, which I think has been terrific, is how you are now talking with key stakeholders, Ameren I know we are, around the community, large industrial users, community groups, because you have to be thoughtful about equity when you're making some of these decisions, with universities, right? And with organizations like National Labs and EPRI and so many others. And we do these things, and this is what the law is helping us do, and that will accelerate innovation. So it'll make innovation be done well. And so, Brian, those things that you laid out are clearly out there. I would not forget about electric vehicles and transportation people. That too is being pushed. We're still in the middle of those decisions, working with Jigar and some of these other folks. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a real important effort for our industry, collaborating to get this clean energy technologies transformation.
All right, Warner, you know that to talk about the success in the infrastructure law is going to bring me to talk about what we're still trying to be successful at, which is at passing this clean energy tax package in the Congress. And, Rich, I wanted you to expand on what you think the status of it all is right now, but you had a very early view with regard to the technology neutral aspect of the tax package that Chairman Wyden put forward. Tell us about that, tell us your view on it, and handicap it for me.
I'm not sure I can handicap.
Everyone leaned forward when we said handicap.
Any better than anybody else in this room. So if anyone else has any intel and wants to ask a question, I think that would be really helpful for us all. I do think that there's an interesting opportunity as this conversation moves forward, regardless of what happens right now in reconciliation, with the leadership that Senator Wyden took in attempting to move the conversation to a more technology-neutral, technology-inclusive place. And now with the partnership of Senator ClearPath, who's ranking member in Senate Finance, as you know what will happen this fall, potentially the chair of Senate Finance going forward, they both now have kind of dueling concepts for technology-neutral or technology-inclusive clean energy tax incentives. So I think lots of folks are familiar with the Wyden approach. The ClearPath approach, a little newer, now bipartisan and bicameral, is called the Energy Sector Innovation Credit. It effectively lays out pathways for every advanced clean energy generating technology. It would start them off with very rich ITCs and production tax credits, your choice, up front, and then those would ramp down as the technology ramped up and matured. So the concept is let's refocus federal tax equity dollars on the newer technologies to help them break into the market in the way that solar and wind historically did. So I think it's now very interesting. So I think going forward, we're no longer going to have a debate about whether to incentivize clean energy technologies coming out of the grid. It's just going to be about the nature of that. And then what are the deals that come together, as we go into, maybe end of the year, omnibus discussions or maybe tax extended packages next year. I think the one thing we know about times of energy crisis, which I think we're now firmly in, is that we pass major energy independence, scarcity, and clean and climate legislation from times of energy crisis. Right, we did that in 05, we did that in 07, we did that in the 70s and the 90s. I expect going forward, regardless of what happens this year, we'll be looking at lots of opportunities for those in the next couple.
Yeah, Jigar, it reminds me when Rich is kind of laying that out, that maybe the Loan Program Office doesn't have such a direct interest in those clean energy tax credits, but I think you argue that it absolutely does, simply because it jumpstarts some of those technologies for you that probably helps industry and individual players be able to look at the Loan Program Office as a tool, because you're jumpstarting some of those carbon-free technologies. Are you seeing any of that action, particularly? I know you've been so involved with next generation nuclear and all your thoughts about that, but I know you gave a terrific talk at Guggenheim up in New York that we partnered on, and I just want you to give a little bit of a view inside the Loan Program Office and how you all are viewing the outcome of those tax credits and maybe jump-starting something for you. I mean, maybe hydrogen, maybe this is a good opportunity to talk about the green hydrogen storage project that you just funded.
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, I think a lot of what we're trying to do, and my panelists on stage here as well, is really trying to achieve liftoff in these things, right? And when you think about what it's taken to achieve that level of liftoff in solar and wind and lithium-ion battery storage and other places, it's roughly $100 billion of capital formation by institutional entities, right? And it goes through 4 stages, right? You have first-of-a-kind deployment, sort of have engineering excellence. You have the learning curve phase where you have the 5 cumulative revenues with the process. And then you've got the Wall Street securitization phase, which I think is overlooked sometimes, right? And so all of these tools that we've been given, whether it's tax credits or whether it's the infrastructure bill or others, have to be thoughtfully crafted to attract $100 billion of capital. Because if you don't attract $100 billion of capital, then you end up with a bunch of demonstration projects, which are cool, but not actually, getting you to the mass market, right? Which is where you want to get to. And so a lot of what we do at the Loan Programs Office is think about this, because for us, we are taking a 20 to 30 year position in this commercial debt as it's put, right? And when you look at our loan portfolio, the places where we've been the most challenged are places where we didn't cross the bridge, right? So on solar thermoelectric projects, we had several of those where we're still carrying the loans for those projects that were built in 2014 to 2013. The ecosystem for those has evaporated. I mean, if you want to get a new heliostat or a new sort of like molten salt thing or whatever it is, it's not that easy to get those spare parts right now. But those plants have a 20-year power purchase agreement, right? And so those are the projects most challenging for us. So we actually have an entire group of people at the Loan Programs Office that thinks about, how is this loan going to work for the next 20 years? How do we build the ecosystem? I know that this technology is 3 percentage points more efficient than this one, but this one has a better ecosystem around it than this one does, right? And so when you think about the Delta ACES project that we just funded last week, that project is in Delta, Utah. It's on top of a salt cavern. It's an 1,800 megawatt coal plant that's going to run through 2025 and then be converted to a combined cycle gas turbine. We're going to store roughly 150 gigawatt hours of hydrogen in that salt cavern. It's initially going to have 220 megawatts of electrolyzers, right? But can have 2,000 megawatts of electrolyzers, right? Which basically makes it operate less like hydrogen and more like pumped hydrogen, right? You basically, when you have capacity, you take hydrogen, stick it in there, and when you need it back out, it comes out and burns through the CCGT. But I think part of this also, which I think is a layer that we're all concerned about, is that we have had innovation at the Department of Energy for its entire inception. Right? We have been the driver of innovation around the world, whether it's photovoltaic panels, everyone's talking about bifacial right now, that was done here, right along with our friends at the New South Wales and Australia. But the same thing's true with offshore wind or onshore wind or electrolyzer technology, et cetera. And because we were not interested in bringing forward the tools to commercialize these technologies here, and those tools include EEI member support, right? Because the utilities are the ones who have to sign the power purchase agreement and agree to get this stuff through. Because we weren't interested in doing that, we sort of sent a lot of these technologies to the Europeans and said, you pay for the first, iteration of this, or send it to the Chinese, right? I mean, LFP batteries were invented at UT Austin, and Paddle and BYD licensed it from us, right? And then scaled it up. And so we have all the technologies here, and I think the part that I'm most proud of the infrastructure bill and this tax package is this commitment now to actually take American innovation, create American manufacturing jobs with them, and American commercialization approaches here with partnerships on EEI.
Warner, as I mentioned, you're sort of front and center on both of these issues, both the infrastructure law that we'll be working to implement over the next 2 years. But one of the things that I noticed that you did was you changed our strategy with regards to the tax package, the clean energy tax package, and how we talked about it. This was really just in the middle of, or really at the beginning of, rising inflation, rising energy prices, and really changed the lexicon to policymakers on why these tax credits were so important for our customers. Tell us just a little bit, it's no secret right now that something really has to happen in the next 30 days, roughly, because of the way the congressional calendar works. How do you view that? And, you know, I won't have you handicap it. We've got a lot of work to do, as you say.
Good luck. That wasn't going to happen anyway.
But give us your view on that.
But you know, look, big picture. You know, Brian said it well, and you gave me part credit in terms of talking about it. But the reality is, when you talk to policymakers, you know, it is critical that you give them the why. And the why behind all this. Often, when you think about tax credits and it's written about, you think, well, you know, the only people that are benefiting from this are shareholders. And the reality is, what we all understand, being in our space, is being part of the regulated business. All these tax credits flow directly back to our customers, immediately, in some respects. And so we wanted to make sure we spoke to policymakers that, you know, there was clear understanding of that. And secondly, you know, the other why to this was that, as I said earlier, you know, for us to achieve the ambitious goals that we want to achieve for this country, we clearly need to have these investments. We need to have this, you know, these tax incentives, and done sooner than later, to marry them with the bipartisan infrastructure law at the same time. If there's ever a time to do this, now is the time. So we can supercharge, you know, the innovation that we want to have done in the country, and do it affordably. Because right now, you know, even when we started having this conversation with policymakers a year and a half ago, perhaps, Brian, in a meaningful way, you know, we didn't foresee the inflationary challenges that we see today. But now more than ever, these clean energy tax incentives will make the clean energy transition more affordable for our customers. And that's, you know, frankly, when you think about all of our strategies in industry, you know, the customers are at the center. And so to the extent that we can drive benefits of a clean energy transition, as well as don't forget about, you know, we have the transmission and storage and those types of things which are so critical for resiliency and reliability. Putting those two things together for our customers as part of this law, you know, this is why, you know, I think policymakers continue to have the climate clean energy package on the table. I'm not going to predict, but I mean, I think there's a lot of bipartisan support for that, and I'm not sure there'll be any bipartisan votes for it. I'm not suggesting that. We speak to both sides of the aisle, and they understand the importance of some of these tax incentives. So, Brian, we're going to continue. We're working it, and we're going to continue to work it because we know how important it is to get this across the finish line as an industry, not just for our industry, but for our country.
I'm getting a good view of what my summer is going to look like. Rich, you know, we talk about some of these technologies, but what do you think are some of the, as you talk to policymakers on both sides of the aisle, but what do you think are some, when you think about RDD&D, what are some of the best policies you think that are possible, you know, even when we think about a next generation, you know, energy legislation? You know, what do you think about that? What do you think is the art of the possible, as you said before?
Well, I do think that some version, you know, bipartisan, I think some version of incentives, you know, I think it's going to be bipartisan, weighted more toward technology neutral, technology inclusive, especially with built-in arrangements, like the energy sector credit. Makes a lot of sense. I think there will be continued bipartisan support for funding all of these programs and for robust funding for DOD. I think folks are thrilled with Jigar's performance, and as a team member, with the team at years, performance in getting dollars efficiently out the door and doing so in a way that's very technology inclusive, right? So the fact that the very first project that the reinvigorated LPO announced was effectively a blue hydrogen project, right? I think went a long way.
We don't see color.
What's that? Right, okay, right, yes. Forget about the rainbow. It was just clean. It was a clean hydrogen project. Clean hydrogen project. So I think that I think that there will continue to be a lot of support for continued robust appropriations for DOE, maybe even further expansion of the programs. And then lastly, one thing I'm very excited about, and this is important both for demonstrating the first phase of these technologies, but more importantly, deploying them at scale. We clearly have a massive problem with permitting in this country, whether that's permitting, you know, new power plants, new transmission lines, new pipelines to carry natural gas to a site, carbon dioxide away from the site, clean hydrogen to a site, whatever. We have a massive problem with permitting and with social license to build. And this is an issue where the conservative policymakers that we primarily work with, we have a line of 100 of those ready to do the permitting reform bill tomorrow, right? It's been a little bit more of a challenge on the other side of the aisle. That said, I think we're starting to see robust, broad support on the left of center. Sort of Senator Schatz kind of broke this open with the I'm sure you all follow Senator Brian Schatz from Hawaii, right, in the room. So I see a nod over there, so somebody does. So he kind of broke this open and said, you know, I'm a climate person. We need to talk about building projects faster than we currently are. Then Brian Deese at the White House followed on with that. And I think there's now starting to be a lot more permission for folks on the left of center as well to talk about significant reforms to processes like NEPA that have been really, really difficult to touch previously. And I do think that as part of a bigger package, we might actually be able to see some significant reform, both on big picture NEPA and then smaller picture. I mean, I think we should be talking about things like, there's a lot of folks in this room who operate reactor fleets. Right now, folks will recall the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has a pure safety mandate, unlike the FAA or the FDA, which have dual mandates to both enable and ensure safety. NRC has a pure safety mandate. I think we could expand that, given the severity of the climate challenge and the need to very rapidly find new advanced reactor technologies. I think we ought to have a dual mandate at the NRC, or at least a portion of the NRC that could work on these. And so I think there's lots of areas where we can see significant regulatory and permitting reform ahead.
Okay, that's really important. Warner, give me some idea, being on this sort of business side of deploying these technologies. From Ameren's perspective, what are you really keeping your eye on? I mean, I know as Jigar pointed out, the hydrogen's really been getting a lot of the air in the room, so to speak. I think that there are clearly other technologies out there that are going to be demonstrated, are currently being demonstrated. What are your thoughts there?
Sure. Well, clearly hydrogen is one of them. I mean, like many others, we see this as hopefully an opportunity that could be a game changer for our country. So this is one, Brian, I said a little bit earlier, where we're working with a range of folks to try and get our arms around this, not just for potentially a hydrogen hub, but see how we can really accelerate this technology, in our region. But then, look, carbon capture. When we just step back, I mean, this is a technology which is used today, not at scale, but it could truly, when you think about the types of generation that we still have in this country, and natural gas is going to have to be part of our bridge fuel. From my perspective, carbon capture is going to be one of those things that we're paying very careful attention to. Long duration storage. Right, those are important things that are part of this this bill that we too are looking very closely at. And then of course we're rooting for some of these other things. Advanced nuclear, we have a nuclear power plant, and we're grateful that we do. And so when you step back and you think about all the things we've been talking about, these types of technologies, it isn't just for the clean energy transition, but it truly is for energy security in this country too. Right. When energy is being used as a weapon today, and it is. For us to be successful at doing some of these things and getting at it now is going to be critical. And so that's why, we're looking at some of these things, Brian, and those are some that we're focused on right now.
Jigar, give us a little bit of view. Clearly the hydrogen announcement from last week got a lot of attention, but if you're thinking about priorities in LPO right now, what is really the other technology that you spend a lot of your time on? I'd mentioned before that you've been very involved and engaged on advanced nuclear. Would that be it? And tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say that I think we first have to focus on the sort of 10,000 foot level of what we're trying to accomplish, and then I think the technologies fall from that. I think one of the things that is truly unique about this EEI event, but also the partnership that we've had over the last 12 months, is that there's a great recognition that the last 20 to 40 years have really been about sort of managing a business that's not really growing, right? We basically sell roughly the same number of kilowatt hours today that we did in 2003, right? A little bit more. We're projecting that the electric utility industry will be the workhorse for for the next 15 years, right? And double the total number of kilowatt hours it's going to sell. Well, when you double the total number of kilowatt hours you sell, everything changes, right? So when you think about your IRP and you think, well, you know, we need to like decarbonize this number of kilowatt hours. No, actually, you need to decarbonize this number of kilowatt hours and grow by the same number of kilowatt hours, right? So now the question becomes, well, like, what do you do in that environment? How do you rewrite the IRP? What tools and modeling support do you need? Like, what technologies are important there? And so some of the technologies that come to the fore are, you absolutely need flexible baseload technologies, right? You're not going to be able to do this with variable renewable energy technologies and by 5xing the grid. Like, we're going to have to expand the grid substantially. 5xing the grid is going to be very difficult to do, which is what it takes to power New York City with, you know, Nevada sun. So I think when you think about how our grid works and what we're trying to accomplish, we're getting a tremendous number of long line transmission lines that have come in using modern technology. We're leading all the HVDC mesh work on the offshore wind integration. We're leading, we've got $11 billion now of nuclear applications that have come in to the office, and we're leading all of the micro conversations to be able to get the trust level up. Clearly there's, you know, there was a lot of enthusiasm in 2008, 2009. That enthusiasm has waned. We got to bring it back up. I think we're doing a really good job of that, and we're seeing a lot of support here. But you also, on the electric vehicle side, the entire model for electric vehicles is up in the air. So there's a lot of people on this side who say, well, we just need to make sure there's enough pipes to like charge your car in 17 minutes. No, not really. Actually, like, you know, like if you do this the wrong way, the T&D infrastructure is going to triple in cost, right? So we've got to figure out how to like manage load in a way that we manage supply today, right? And figuring out what the protocols of that look like are all coming through our office. So we have $11 billion of virtual power plant applications, mostly around how you do manage charging and all of that, right? And then the other piece that we have a lot of is critical minerals. So we've got, you know, $6 billion worth of applications in for critical minerals. We announced the Vidalia graphite processing facility in Louisiana. We have several more that are coming. And so when you think about what an electric utility does, it is constantly thinking through the entirety of its risk profile. Everything from availability of fuel all the way to, you know, figuring out how to create resiliency and affordability for customers. And all of that leads to loan applications that have come in, from hydrogen to transmission to generation to all these other pieces. And so we're quite proud of playing that role. But the last thing I would say is that, just to summarize this set of comments, is this is really about changing our mindset to energy abundance, right? I think for 20, 40 years, we've been thinking about energy efficiency and how we do more with less. And we should still do that through our codes and standards and all that stuff. But we actually now need to think about, what does it look like to have more electricity available to us than we could possibly fathom that we need? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are fathoming, right? And so they're creating all sorts of cool things like electronic fuels and like all these other things, right? Which are great, but like you need a surplus of electricity to do that.
All right, Jigar, I'm gonna let you close this out. You know, in this room is probably what, through your eyes, you probably see customers. You know, they're potential customers of the Loan Program Office. Give us your 60-second pitch on that. If you know, you've been talking about that. You've been talking about really luring more companies into the office. What does that mean for you? And just describe that pitch for us.
Which is going to happen.
I think that fundamentally what we're all talking about, and you know, certainly Rich and I talk pretty regularly, is America has to be able to do big things, right? We have to. I think whether it's commercializing technologies that we've invented on electric vehicles, whether it's commercializing technologies that we invented around HVDC lines, whether it's commercializing technologies around hydrogen, commercializing technologies around next generation battery storage, it is our technologies that are powering China, powering Eastern Europe, powering all these countries. And it is time for us to figure out what American industrial policy looks like, right? And so I do want everyone to come into the loan programs office and pitch your particular project to do this, but I also want you to come to me with your impossible ask, right? If you're saying, the only way we're gonna do this, Jigar, is if we redo all of our transmission lines with HVDC, make the ask. If the only way we're gonna do this is to reduce permitting from 12 years to 4 years, like, tell me how you suggest we're gonna do this. 1 year, right? You know?
You said make the impossible ask.
Absolutely, absolutely. But like, make the impossible ask, because I think that we are at a point right now where we're all aligned, right? You've got a common enemy where there are people who are trying to make energy into a weapon, as Warner suggested. And we have all the technology, all the know-how, all the capability in this country, and we have not allowed ourselves to think bigger about this. And so that's the role of the Loan Programs Office. Our average loan size is $1 billion right now. So we have 77 loan applications seeking $78.9 billion. And so we have people thinking bigger every day coming in, and so think bigger with us.
You owe me for that. Warner, Rich, Jigar, thank you very much. We appreciate you being on the panel today. It was awesome to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.